The Pittsburgh Steelers are facing a major decision involving Joey Porter Jr., and according to the information coming out of the situation, the biggest question may not be whether the Steelers want to keep him. The bigger question is whether Porter will eventually be willing to accept less money than he is currently seeking in order to secure his long-term future in Pittsburgh. Reports discussed in the source indicate that Porter is seeking a market-setting contract worth at least $33, $1 million per season. However, multiple Steelers insiders believe the negotiations could eventually move in a different direction. The expectation from Mark Kaboly is that if Porter remains determined to become the highest paid cornerback in the league, negotiations may struggle to move forward. At some point, both sides may need to find a middle ground. That is where the situation becomes extremely interesting for Steelers fans. The current belief from the insiders discussed in the source is that a long-term extension could still happen before the start of the regular season, but only if Porter is willing to adjust his financial expectations. Ray Fittipaldo also expressed the belief that a deal could ultimately get done, arguing that Pittsburgh has leverage because Porter must consider the risks of playing another season without a new contract. From the Steelers' perspective, the leverage is significant. Porter is under contract, and the belief discussed in the source is that he is unlikely to sit out regular season games. That means Pittsburgh does not necessarily have to rush into accepting demands for a market-setting deal. The organization can afford to wait, maintain its current position, and allow Porter to make the next move. The Steelers also reportedly feel comfortable with the depth they currently have at cornerback. Asante Samuel Jr. has reportedly performed very well during camp and was even described as one of the best performers on the roster. On the depth chart released ahead of the preseason matchup against Buffalo, Samuel was listed alongside Porter as one of the starting cornerbacks, with Jamel Dean also included in the group. That does not necessarily mean the Steelers want Porter out of Pittsburgh. In fact, the opposite is true based on the information in the source. But it does suggest that the team is not willing to feel pressured into handing out whatever number is being requested. Pittsburgh's message appears to be simple. The team wants its young cornerback to remain in black and gold, but there is a limit to how far the organization is willing to go, and this is where the decision becomes extremely complicated for Porter. He can take the security of a long-term contract now, even if the annual value is below the number he originally wanted. Or he can bet on himself, play the final season of his rookie deal, and attempt to prove that he deserves an even larger contract in the future. Both paths have major advantages, but both also carry significant risks. The source discusses a possible scenario in which a long-term contract could average between $28 million and $30 million per season, although the exact number Pittsburgh may be willing to offer is not known. The financial argument for accepting that type of deal is easy to understand. Porter would immediately secure a massive contract and avoid the uncertainty that comes with waiting another season. The numbers become even more interesting when looking at the potential alternative. According to the discussion in the source, Porter's current base salary is approximately $4.9 million, while a projected franchise tag for 2027 could be somewhere around $22.8 million to $23 million. Combined, that would put his earnings over the next 2 seasons at approximately $27.7 million. A new contract paying $28 million or $30 million per season would obviously change that picture dramatically. More importantly, a new contract would provide protection against uncertainty. Once the deal is signed, the money is secured. If he suffers an injury, that would no longer threaten his ability to obtain the next major payday. The same would apply if his performance declined or if his value changed because of another difficult season. The security of signing now is undeniable. But there is another side to this story. Porter could believe that accepting less money now would mean leaving a significant amount of money on the table. If he has another outstanding season, his value could potentially rise even further. The market at the top of the cornerback position could also continue to increase as other major contracts are completed. The source specifically points to the possibility that the longer Porter waits, the more money could become available at the top of the market. That means waiting could be the path to an even bigger payday. But waiting also means accepting all the risks that come with another season without a long-term contract. An injury could change everything. A less productive season could change everything. Even small details that affect how teams evaluate a player could influence his future market. So this is not simply about how much Porter believes he is worth today. It is about how much he is willing to risk in order to chase the contract he truly wants. The source also raises another possibility that Steelers fans cannot ignore. If Porter remains completely committed to receiving a market-setting contract and the Steelers refuse to meet that number, a trade request could eventually become part of the conversation. That does not mean Pittsburgh would actually agree to move him. The Steelers would still have the option to keep him, let him play out the final year of his rookie contract, and potentially use the franchise tag in the following offseason. According to the discussion, the Steelers still view Porter as a long-term building block for the franchise, and would not appear willing to move him unless another team delivered an extraordinary offer. The belief presented in the source is that Pittsburgh would likely demand at least a first-round pick, and potentially even more, because the organization would prefer to keep a young player it sees as part of its future. So right now, Steelers fans are looking at a situation that could go in several different directions. A compromise could lead to a long-term extension before the season begins. Porter could decide to bet on himself and play another season without a new deal. The Steelers could maintain their current position and potentially prepare to use the franchise tag in the future. Or, if the disagreement becomes more serious, the possibility of a trade request could enter the conversation. The question is, which direction do you think this situation should go for Joey Porter Jr. and the Pittsburgh Steelers? Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, if this situation reaches the point where a trade becomes a serious possibility, the Pittsburgh Steelers would have to make one thing absolutely clear: Joey Porter Jr. would not be cheap. The information in the source points to Pittsburgh viewing him as a long-term building block, and that changes everything when it comes to his trade value. The Steelers are not in a position where they have to move him, and they would reportedly have little reason to accept an offer that does not properly reflect what they believe they would be giving up. The discussion suggests that a first-round pick would likely be the minimum starting point, with Pittsburgh potentially asking for even more before seriously considering a deal. That is why several trade ideas presented by Bleacher Report were heavily criticized in the source. The first proposal involves sending Porter to the Chicago Bears in exchange for a second-round pick and a sixth-round pick. From the perspective presented in the source, that simply would not be enough for Pittsburgh. The argument is that the Steelers would rather keep their young cornerback for another season than move him for a package that does not include a first-round selection. However, Chicago was still discussed as a destination that could make some sense if the Bears were willing to pay the real price. Their defensive scheme was mentioned as a possible fit, particularly because Dennis Allen uses a significant amount of man coverage. Porter has been described in the source as an excellent man-to-man corner, so the football fit could exist, but the financial cost would be enormous because acquiring him would likely require both significant draft compensation and the market-setting contract he is reportedly seeking. The second proposal involved the Green Bay Packers, with a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick being discussed as the potential return. Once again, the source strongly rejected the idea that this would be enough. The key issue is simple. If Pittsburgh wants a first-round pick as the minimum requirement, then an offer without one is unlikely to move the conversation forward. The New York Giants were also mentioned in another proposed package involving a second-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and a sixth-round pick. But the source again questioned whether that would make sense for Pittsburgh, especially because none of those assets is a first-round selection. The broader point remains the same. The Steelers would reportedly rather maintain control of their cornerback than accept a collection of picks that does not match their valuation. And then came the proposal involving the Miami Dolphins. According to the source, Bleacher Report suggested a third-round pick and a fourth-round pick in exchange for Porter. This was described as the most disrespectful proposal of all. The argument presented was that Pittsburgh would have no reason to consider moving a young cornerback viewed as a major player at his position for that type of return, especially when the organization still has contractual leverage. And that brings us back to the central issue. The Steelers do not appear to be in a weak negotiating position. They have control over the immediate future. Porter is under contract for the current season. If a long-term agreement does not happen, the team can allow him to play out the final year of his rookie deal. The possibility of using the franchise tag in the following offseason is also part of the leverage discussed in the source. That is why a trade is not necessarily the most likely outcome, even if negotiations become difficult. Pittsburgh reportedly wants to keep Porter, and the team does not appear to be interested in moving him simply because he may want more money. If no outside team meets the asking price, the Steelers can simply hold their position. And honestly, that may be the most important detail for Steelers fans to understand right now. The pressure is not entirely on Pittsburgh to solve this immediately. The Steelers can wait, they can continue negotiating, they can let the season play out, they can evaluate what happens next, and if Porter continues to demand a contract at the very top of the market, market, the team still has options. Of course, Porter also has options. He can accept a deal now and secure his future. He can decide to play another season and bet on himself. He can attempt to increase his value by delivering another major year. But every option comes with consequences, and that is what makes this situation so fascinating, because the longer the negotiations continue, the more difficult the decision becomes. For Porter, accepting less than the number he wants could mean giving up the chance to become the highest paid player at his position, but betting on himself means accepting the risk that an injury or a disappointing season could change the entire conversation. For the Steelers, paying him what he wants could mean committing massive money to a single player, but refusing to meet his demands creates the possibility of a longer dispute and potentially more uncertainty about his future with the team. So this is not just a normal contract negotiation. This could become one of the defining situations surrounding the Steelers as they approach the regular season. The most important question now is whether both sides can find the middle ground that the insiders discussed.